Hi everyone. So this is the lecture on research planning and question forming, which will help us to satisfy the learning outcome of being able to effectively plan a research endeavor by learning to construct a research question, identify the extent of information needed to satisfy that research question, and to identify appropriate source types for a variety of research needs. We will go over some of the best practices for planning a research endeavor, elements of which will directly correlate with the research planning assignment. So before we really get into the skills that we're going to be discussing, I want you to do a quick exercise where you look around the room. Find one thing that you don't know how to fully explain. Are there fluorescent lights in the room, for example? A microwave, if you're in your kitchen, TV, gaming system, a computer that you're looking at to watch this video. Find something that you don't know how to fully explain how it works. And what is it that you don't understand about that thing? What is it that you need to find out so that you can understand it? And how might you express what you need to find out? So at the moment, I'm looking into a microphone. It's modern, but it has an old-timey style, like one used by radio broadcasters of the 30s. There's plenty I don't know about this microphone. I really only know its outward appearance and what it produces, recorded sound. Do I know how it helps to record sound? Absolutely not. I assume there are some mechanisms inside that allow it to communicate with the computer I'm using to record my voice with, but I have no idea how that actually works. So if I were interested, I'd have to research it. I'd have to come up with some way to ask some search tool how a microphone works. And it may be just that simple, but then again, it may not. I probably need to know what kind of microphone this is. Digital, analog, is that even a thing for microphones? I don't know. I'd have to do some background research just to make sure I was looking up information on the right type of microphone. That background research would then at least give me the right terminology to search for. So just Googling the microphone's brand, I was able to find out that this is a condenser mic. So then I can query, how do condenser microphones work? I've come up with a research question that is as specific to my needs as I can get while just starting out. So that's what this lecture is all about. Learning how to identify the key steps and elements required for successfully planning a research endeavor. One of the first steps in research planning is coming up with some background research. So if my example before was, what kind of microphone am I even looking at? And finding out that it's a condenser mic. That's really viable background research. And that's going to be something that you're probably going to need to do when developing your research question. And best ways to do this are really simple, stuff that you do all the time. Using Google, just getting started, figuring out what are the key issues about your topic. Google's a good way to do that. You can find out current information from news sources, magazine sources. You might run across a scholarly source or two, depending on what your topic is. Wikipedia is also a good source for background research, especially when you're just looking for places, people, time frames, broad strokes of major events, just really basic stuff about something specific. And then also print encyclopedias, online encyclopedias, dictionaries, handbooks, directories, and all different types of reference books that we have in our library, and pretty much every library across the country will have some reference materials, are also really good places to begin research and coming up with the background research. And remember, background research isn't often the stuff that you would necessarily cite in a research endeavor, but it is the stuff that gets you started. So think about things like names of places, specific dates, all that stuff would be contained in background research. So even if you just needed to know what specific years did World War II cover, that would be background research. You wouldn't cite the Wikipedia page or the Google entry that tells you that our involvement was from 1941 to 1945. You wouldn't necessarily cite that unless it were really key to what you were talking about. But in most cases, that would not be. It would be considered background research, and you would use that as a launch pad to further research. So again, it's helping with identifying key things that will help you build that research question. Another key scope in research planning is scoping. So scoping is when you're determining the nature of what it is that you're looking for. So you want to think about what resources that you actually need. So you're looking at the range of what a resource covers. So if you have a topic that's in a specific subject area, so if you're researching chimpanzees, for example, you probably want to be searching something in biology, or if there's something even more specific to primatology, search within that. So you're looking for things like subject, format. So these can be academic journal articles, newspapers, books, magazines, documentaries, any other type of source that would be specifically appropriate for your topic. So things to think about within format are thinking about like what are the goals of the publication type. If you were citing something from Breitbart News, for example, you have to know that Breitbart News has a very specific goal in mind when they're publishing information. Same can be said with scholarly information as well. If you're using a scholarly article to just simply give you some really basic background information, that might not be so appropriate. So thinking about format as appropriateness for your topic is going to be a key element of planning your research, and then also thinking about the time period or currency of a resource type that you might need. So if you're doing historical research, for example, you probably do want newspapers from whatever time frame that is. If you're researching something on the Titanic, you might need newspapers from 1912. You might also be looking at some new development on the Titanic, in which case you would want to look for more recent information, see if somewhere like Smithsonian or the New Yorker or some feature magazine has done a follow-up story on it or something like that. Just an example. So subject, format, and currency or time period are all parts of scopes that you want to think about, and this will help you with determining the most appropriate source types. It'll help you determine what subject areas to search within, and it will have you thinking about the scope and how you search. So for the time frame, for example, if you need just recent information, you can actually tell our databases, I don't want results that go farther back than 2010. And so that would be a way of scoping your time period for the resources that you get back from your actual search queries. Something else that you're going to be challenged with is narrowing your topic. So I expect most of you will start with a broad topic, but that broad topic is going to have to be narrowed into something that's a little bit more researchable, meaning that there's multiple elements to it and it's specific enough to where it's going to lead you down a research path. And I'll explain a little bit more about that as we go, but some ways to narrow a topic is just by different ways of brainstorming, and that's really what we're looking at with this slide. And so how do you narrow a topic? Well, just regular old brainstorming, writing down things in a list will help. You can organize your brainstorming a little bit more with things like cluster and concept mapping, which this is where you would take your larger concept, like, for example, video games, and then start drawing off little branches. So what about video games are important or interesting to you? Is it the violence that might be in video games? Are you thinking about that? Is it the design side of video games? Is that what you want to research? Is it the people that play video games? I know competitive gaming is getting really big now, so maybe that's something that you were interested in. And then for those different little bubbles that you would draw around, you would just draw different little arms that will help you come up with more narrow aspects of that key topic. And if you're interested in doing that, feel free to do it, but it's not something that we're going to necessarily do in class as far as assignments go. However, you are going to be asked to think more about classifications and asking questions. And so another way to narrow your topic is to do what's called classifying, and we'll talk about that in just a second, and then also beginning to form some questions that could maybe lead to a more viable research question. So classifying is a way of breaking down key elements and identifying key elements of your topic that might help you lead to a research question. And this is just one form of brainstorming. You don't have to do it this way. This is sort of the who, what, when, where, and why type of topic exploration. But you do what you're comfortable with. Do it as most appropriate for your specific research needs, and you'll be fine. You don't necessarily have to do it just like this. Some people do what's called the 3 Ps, where they think of population, problem, and place. It's very similar to this. And it's just a way of identifying some things that might help lead you to a research question. So in this example, we've got the topic of video games. Where do I care about video games? I'm not so interested in all of the world, but I am more interested in video games as they pertain to the United States. So I'll put that for the where. And then when? 2000 to present. Sure, we're not terribly worried about the pre-PlayStation kind of stuff. And so we'll do 2000 to present. And then who's the population that I'm interested in playing video games? Well, we'll go with children, youth. That might be the population that's most influenced by something like video games. And then what? What's the what that I'm interested in? And we're going to go with violence for this particular one. And then that can lead us to a why. So why question. Do video games promote violent behavior in children? And if so, you would say why. And that would help you to start at least exploring. And now that might not be the research question you land upon, but it could be one that will at least help you with coming up with different ways to ask a question like that. And we'll talk about that more in just a second. So coming up with some questions that can frame your topic will really help with leading to a really viable research question. So in this slide, we're looking at a few different iterations of a question. So are violent video games the cause of aggressive behavior in children? Are they? That's sort of leading to maybe a yes or no question. I mean, it could be exploratory, but it's probably leading the researcher to go down one path or another, where they would try to claim that yes, they are causing aggressive behavior, or no, they are not. And really, with a good research question, you want to explore all those angles. So our second try here is then, do violent video games promote violence to children? Again, we're kind of looking at that yes or no. It's not really looking at much nuance. There's no degree within that question. So finally, getting to that third iteration, we've got, to what extent are violent video games responsible for aggressive behavior in children? So this helps us not make that cut and dry conclusion that yes or no, but rather, well, if they do, how much are they responsible for aggressive behavior? And if they don't, well, then what are some good things that are leading people away from aggressive behavior? And so that way we've got a little bit better of a research question. It's a little more exploratory, and it doesn't lead to that one path over the next. It helps with looking at different angles. So we'll stick with this one for the rest of this lecture. So here we've landed on a research question. To what extent are violent video games responsible for aggressive behavior in children? And this will be the question we'll stick with for the remainder of the lecture. So your next step in the process is going to be taking that research question and breaking it down into something that's a little more searchable. In Google, you could ask that question and maybe get some things. But in our library databases, which we're going to be using heavily in this class, they don't really like questions. They like you to definitely use your research question to guide you to sources that will help you answer it, but it doesn't do it in a way where you can just use natural language where you just ask a question. So you have to do a little bit of work, and mostly that entails breaking your research question down into some keywords and key phrases. And the best way to start with that is to think about the major concepts. So for the question that we've identified, the major concepts can include video games, aggressive behavior, and children. And another challenge with coming up with keywords based on your research question is that those major concepts might include phrasing that isn't necessarily the only phrasing that's going to be used by scholars and writers that are talking about this topic. So in other words, every writer has their own brain with their own word choice, and they're going to choose what they decide is best. And so thinking of different ways to come up with ways to say your major concepts are really going to help. And this is going to give you more keywords and more fodder for entering into the research databases. And that way you're kind of casting a broader search net. So thinking about additional concepts. So this can be synonymous concepts. These can be related concepts. So for video games, you could think of the synonym electronic games. It's kind of outdated, but if you're looking for maybe earlier games that might have promoted violence and aggressive behavior, you might want to use electronic games. You could think of specific games. So if you wanted to look for research information on one specific game, like Grand Theft Auto, as a game that exemplifies violence or the promotion of violence, you can search for that. Also thinking about your other concepts, so aggressive behavior, just thinking about synonyms, violence, of specific types of aggressive behavior, bullying. And then for children, just think of the different ways that you can iterate that population set. So children, youth, adolescents, you could say elementary age, you could say students, you could say any number of things to help cast that search net as wide as possible. And finally, one of the last steps is going to be thinking about what subject areas might be interested in your topic. So for this topic, violence in video games and adolescent development, we might think about sociology, psychology, criminal justice, and of course education, which is going to talk about those developments. But of course, sociology certainly would look at the elements that would connect the influence of video games to something like aggressive behavior. And so coming up with what subject areas will be involved with your topic will help with identifying databases and places to start searching. And so for your research planning assignment, which is the one that's going to be due for this unit, you will essentially be following the steps we just went over, where you will brainstorm what subject areas or disciplines your overall topic might be covered by. We'll identify appropriate source types, so magazine articles, scholarly journal articles, newspapers, statistics, anything that you think is appropriate for your research needs in accordance to your topic. You'll also identify good search tools and databases appropriate for your topic and come up with your research question and then even break that question down into keywords. So a lot of the stuff that we just went over. And this assignment, upon approval from me, will provide you with the research question that you will use throughout the rest of the course assignments as well as the final project. So, in thinking about that, please pick a topic that you were really interested in. It is an absolute punishment to have to research something that you have very little stake in. So find something that hopefully can be attached to your major, or at least something that is very interesting to you that you just want to learn about. And if you have any trouble at all coming up with topics or research questions, please contact me sooner than later so that we can get that going. Hope you all have a wonderful day, and I'll see you in the next lecture.